The issues that are coming up now with Greece and whether or not there will be a Grexit, as it's called, a Greek exit from the euro, has a lot of implications for what's going on in the United States macroeconomy. Hi, I'm Jerry Lynch. I'm professor of economics at Krannert, and I'm also a director of the MBA program. One of the areas that I've had a lot of interest in since it started is the euro and how well that will function, and of course the issues that are coming up now with Greece. When countries spend more than they take in taxes, they borrow, and practically every country in the world does that. When they borrow money, people expect that they're going to buy a bond from the United States, Germany, France, Greece, and in times past they would get paid back in the currency of that country. One of the things the Greeks did very often is if the debt load got too high, the central bank would monetize that debt. That meant the central bank would simply buy all of those bonds up, but in so doing, they'd be putting a lot of money into the economy and causing inflation over time. That meant that buying a Greek bond versus, let's say, a German bond had more risk associated with it because you didn't know what the purchasing power of the drachma was going to be when you got it back. That's why the Greeks were happy to enter the euro, because now they are borrowing in euros and paying back in euros, and because the euro has a more stable purchasing power, Greece could borrow at a lower interest rate. Given that they could borrow at a lower interest rate, they did. Over the ensuing 4 or 5 years, the Greeks have been bailed out 4 or 5 times, and each time they continue not to reform their economy enough. And many people think that it's too difficult for Greece and that Greece would be better off just exiting the euro and going back to the drachma. What impact does that have on U.S. citizens? Actually, quite a bit. Because if countries start to leave the euro, then bondholders all over the world will realize that the bonds that they now hold that have a promise of repayment in euros may wind up with a promise of repayment in the Portuguese, Spanish, Italian, or Greek currency, which may not hold its purchasing power. People decide that they no longer want to hold those bonds, and their safe haven almost always is to move to the United States. If countries start to exit the euro, you will see capital flows into the United States. That will lower interest rates in the United States, which is good, but that will push up the value of the dollar, make it more difficult for firms to sell abroad because the dollar costs more, U.S. goods cost more, make it easier for firms to import because if the dollar costs more, other currencies cost less. And so all of this has very broad implications for what's going on in the macroeconomy today, and that's just one of the things that I like to focus on in my macro class and talk about how small events in what seem like remote corners of the world really have quite an impact on what goes on in the U.S. economy and actually the world economy.